Hello ladies and gentlemen, Elliot here from Lunar Studios. Today I'm going to be doing a video on the Shadowfang Flame Animus Rush and how to counter it. This is a build order that actually we receive a lot of emails about it because people think, oh, it's advantage for player 1, it's broken. And what I want to show you is that it's actually, player 2 has some good counterplay against it, and it actually leads to a very interesting game. I think Shadowfang Flame Animus, well, let me show you the rush first of all, and then you'll see why it's such an issue. So, as player 1, you can do the following. You open drone, drone again, and then you're going to go drone, blast, forge. And let's say player 2 just goes for a double Animus, 12 Fang, Shadowfang opening. Now, on your 4th turn, you end up with 13 gold and 1 blue, which is exactly enough to go Flame Animus, Animus. Now, just look how perfect this build is, alright? We're spending all of our gold. We're going to have exactly 12 drones, 3 red and 1 blue every turn. And so with that, we can buy a Shadowfang and a wall, exactly, using up all our resources every turn. And that's all we're going to do for pretty much the rest of the game. Okay, so player 2 can try and fight back, you know, maybe get Rhino Shadowfang, but we're just going to go Shadowfang wall pretty much every turn for as long as we can. And essentially it becomes difficult to defend. Maybe at some point we're going to have to leave a drone back because, well, we don't even have to. We could go Shadowfang here, but I think it's probably better to leave a drone back. Let's just buy some engineers. And essentially, this build is so efficient as player 1. You get to build a Shadowfang, build walls, and as player 2, you're forced to either play a double Animus strat where you can't get access to walls and it ends up being really difficult to defend, or if you mirror the strat, you end up quite far behind, and I'll show you that line in just a second. You know, I could play out a couple more turns, but it shouldn't be difficult to convince you that this is pretty much impossible for player 2 to do anything about. It's just an overwhelming Shadowfang attack. So anyways, this build has been reported many times. We get emails all the time from people who are saying that they think it's broken. And, well, we haven't done anything about it. We haven't nerfed Shadowfang or changed Flame Animus or anything like that yet, and it's because there's counterplay. And in the vast majority of, say, 8-card sets containing Shadowfang and Flame Animus, there's lots of counterplay. But even in just the straight-up game of base set only plus Shadowfang plus Flame Animus, it's complicated, okay? And player 2 has a defense that leads to a very complicated game. Now, what I'll show you first is I'll show you what happens if player 2 tries to mirror the build, just to give you an idea of what doesn't work. So let's say you go drone, blast, forge. Player 2 can do the same thing. Flame Animus, Animus. Now you notice how player 2 kind of just has too much money and doesn't really have much to do with it. Like, maybe they can get an extra drone and they'll end up 2 drones ahead, but they end up sort of half a turn behind in production of attackers, and they lose an engineer because they don't have the ability to get a wall up. And if both players just kind of do this play of building Shadowfang wall every turn, player 2, even though they have at this point 3 more drones, they're going to end up behind. Because at some point they're going to have to leave back a bunch of drones to defend, and that just gets ugly. And here, this isn't even a feasible defense, so you're going to have to leave back, like, most of your drones, and that's going to be pretty much game over. Now, you know, there are some slight variations, like maybe you could have held back 1 drone less and kind of gambited a little bit, but in all honesty, every line that you play out, player 1 seems to win by a landslide, like not by a small amount. You know, at this point, there's basically nothing else that can be done to prevent that breach. So, player 1 seems to win. Now, so what's the defense? Here's the defense, okay? And the way you want to think about this defense is in the following sense. In a Shadowfang wall game, what is the most useful unit to get? And surprisingly, one of the best units to get is actually Force Field. Now, why is that the case? The reason Force Field's really good in Shadowfang games is because Shadowfang games are super fast. The amount by which attack is increasing every turn is really high, which means that sort of the rate of inflation is very high. 1 gold this turn is worth way more than 1 gold next turn because attack is rising so fast and there's so much pressure, and basically any non-zero breach is pretty much a loss. So when inflation is high, sacrificing your drones is good because the gold that they're gonna produce in future turns isn't really worth as much as it is in more slow-paced games or big defensive games. So force fields offer good value in fast games. And in particular, in the Shadowfang mirror, force fields are awesome because you're bleeding drones so soon in order to protect your Shadowfangs that if you can get a bit more mileage out of them by using force fields instead of just sacrificing your drones, then you get really good value. And player 2 is in a great position to set up for heavy force field production without falling behind in the Shadowfang. So just watch this. Same build. Now here, player 2 can just go drone conduit. Okay, and you might think, why am I getting a conduit? It doesn't make sense. I don't need a conduit. Well, it will help in future turns, and of course the green can be stored. So now player 2 is going to again mirror the build. And you notice that in this case it actually works out for player 2. They have 13 drones, they need 13 to buy Flame Animus. So it's actually a very efficient build, with the exception of this green's just sitting around doing nothing, but it's going to help us later. So, of course, player 1 is still half a turn ahead on attack. They get the free engineer kill, and they get the first Shadowfang up. So player 2 is behind in that sense, but they have a conduit ahead. They're up 1 drone, and they have this stockpile of green that they're going to be able to use effectively. So let's just try this same line that we did before, where player 1 just pumps wall Shadowfang every turn, and we're actually going to see that it, in fact, loses. Here you can buy an engineer. I don't think it really matters too much because we're going to want to force field next turn because player 1 will be attacking for 7. Yeah, we're going to go wall force field Shadowfang. Might actually be better to skip that engineer. There are actually a lot of lines. We've looked at this quite a lot. And now look at all of this green. This is the situation where player 2 can just start force fielding like crazy, and it's actually really good. We can build a Rhino. It's not even obvious whether we're going to get to attack with it. Actually, just putting gold in the bank is good because we can use it to buy another Shadowfang. And you notice player 1's Shadowfang pumping it's kind of got to stop. Like, you can build a Shadowfang here, but then you lose all your walls, and it's not going to work out. So we can go force field and get another Shadowfang. It's probably better just to get more force fields, spam engineers. But essentially, it reaches a fairly complicated game. And it's not obvious who's ahead, and it really depends on the actual play-by-play decisions. But I can show you a line in which I'm confident that player 2 actually is winning. So if player 2 doesn't buy this engineer here, watch what happens. Just storing 2 in the bank. And the reason, you're going to see why we do this. The reason is essentially so that we can afford a Shadowfang next turn. So again, I'm going to keep 2 in the bank, not going to buy another engineer. And we're going to use the force fields in order to kind of buy us time to spend money on Shadowfangs rather than other stuff. So here, opponent's attacking for 9. We're going to go wall, double force field, and then we have just enough for a 4th Shadowfang. And now, player 1's in a bit of trouble because they don't have access to conduits. They don't have the ability to pump force fields. So defense is a bit trickier. And of course, this drone is sort of being held back as defense against the player losing the wall instead of the Rhino. It's actually possible to not hold this drone back and to gambit it instead. If player 1 defends with this Rhino and attacks, then player 1 is going to lose because they're going to have to defend with all these drones to prevent a breach. And player 2, with access to force fields, can just live forever while player 1 is scurrying around trying to defend. And that's basically it right there, because player 2 gets through first. So in that line, player 2 actually wins. Now, so maybe this acceptance of the gambit is bad. So let's try the other variation where we lose the Rhino, defend with the wall, and don't breach here. But this is actually also going to be a win for player 2. And I will show you the relevant line. Essentially, these force fields and the fact that we have this huge stockpile of green just provide access to so much defense throughout the whole game. The amount of value you're getting from this conduit is insane, and player 1 is just having to bleed so many drones. And it does get rather close, but here player 1 has no choice but to allow a small breach. At least one Shadowfang's going to die, and player 2, well, they don't even need to make a force field. They can spam an extra engineer, and that's going to be it. So, again, player 2 seems to win in this line, which is quite remarkable when you think that for a long time we thought that this was a busted opening that favored player 1. So maybe player 1 could play a bit better, because in some of those middle turns, player 1 was just kind of mindlessly buying walls that seemed a bit premature. So maybe there's something even more complicated going on. So let's try some other variations. Same openings, but maybe we can do something a bit better. So wall Shadowfang here for the next couple of turns definitely seems right. Now maybe this wall is unnecessary. Maybe we can delay it till next turn and buy something else. But the problem is there's not actually that much else that we really want to buy. Like, we could try to get up a steel splitter instead of a wall. The problem being that I'm definitely going to need a wall next turn. So player 1's actually in a bit of an uncomfortable buying situation in this line. Maybe this turn we can just not buy anything and try and crank out a steel splitter, or maybe just getting another drone is actually the best thing. We tried so many variations. You know, we could get an engineer here. It's really not at all clear what the best line is. So maybe we can go wall Shadowfang and get another drone, and player 1 can kind of mass up a bigger drone army. So we're going to go force field Shadowfang here. Player 2 is just playing the same stuff we did last time. See, now we're going to have to leave back a drone in order to defend, which makes me think that this drone is probably not correct. So we could try something else. Maybe instead of buying a drone, we'll just buy an engineer. So you never want to buy a drone and then immediately defend with it on the next turn. You would always have preferred to have bought an engineer instead. So sometimes when you're studying build orders, that optimization is relevant. So let's go wall Shadowfang, and maybe we want another engineer. We could save our money with the idea of bleeding a bunch of drones next turn and trying to get to 5 Shadowfangs. But essentially, my point isn't necessarily... I'm not trying to prove that player 1 wins or player 2 wins. I'm just trying to prove that it's complicated. Now, is this a viable line? Losing all the defense just to get up a 5th Shadowfang? It's probably not good for player 1, but maybe we can try it, because player 2 is certainly under a whole lot of pressure. But I don't think it's going to be enough. Player 1's going to have to give up too much. So that's probably not playable. So, I guess player 1 should probably go back and buy an engineer here. So let's try this again. Shadowfang. Wall. So we're probably in Rhino buying territory here, because I mean, I don't think player 1 can get up a 5th Shadowfang. I think player 2 just pressures player 1 too much with this line where they store 2 for 2 turns and then get force fields to get up a 4th Shadowfang. So I think player 1's just got to go Rhinos. And then what? This is a bit awkward defense-wise, but of course, maybe the Rhino doesn't really want to attack, so player 2 could offer up another Gambit. And now we have 2 lines to look at. We could look at defending with the wall, attacking for 9, or defending with the Rhino, attacking for 10. And this seems similar to the other line, but player 1 actually has a few more drones because of some of those middle turns being more optimized. I still think accepting this Gambit probably doesn't work, but we can definitely try it out. In this situation, I'm not sure. Well, this is interesting. I think player 1 may have a win here because player 2 actually doesn't have any way to defend. So maybe that accepting that gambit was correct, or maybe more likely player 1 just has to leave a drone back here to not offer that gambit for a second time. And you can see it's really close. It's not obvious who's winning. Now again, player 1 has two choices: to attack with this rhino or to defend with it. Let's try them both. Let's try attacking. Ooh, this is super close, but I think actually player 2 wins because one Shadowfang is going to die in the breach, but then in this counter breach everything's going to die. So this looks like a player 2 win, which means player 1 has to do something different, perhaps not attack with this rhino. So let's try a line where that rhino stays on D. I guess we can work with one drone and build an engineer. Probably same thing with force field, seems to be the way to go. And now, again, we can either defend with rhino or defend with wall. Allowing that breach seems losing, so let's let's try defending with wall. Well, this also seems losing. So it seems like player 2 wins in this line, but maybe player 1 could have played differently. So maybe, well, what did we do there? We accepted the gambit, so maybe we have to decline the gambit. We can try this line. Just defend regularly. Anyway, you know, we can keep doing this all day, and my point is mostly that there are so many different lines. There are a lot of options for both players. It's not obvious who's winning in sort of the grand scheme of things. And even if you did study this, you know, say you spend all afternoon studying it, you map out all the lines, you draw the game tree, you figure out who actually wins Shadowfang Flame Animus. The thing is, with any other units added to the set, all of these lines get muddled up. There's always going to be other options for other players. Like we showed a set with Shadowfang Flame Animus plus Nevo Charge, and it completely changes the game because suddenly if player 2 does this, then player 2 has access to Nevo Charge in addition to Force Field. And if player 2 has the option of just, you know, buying 2 or 3 Nevo Charges suddenly in the middle of one of these lines, it completely crushes player 1. And it forces the game to go in an entirely different direction. And the amount of complexity that gets added with just one extra unit is huge. And so if you add 2 or 3 or you know 5 or 6 other extra units, then the chance that the game is going to play out exactly like this, exactly like we're seeing it here in just base set plus Shadowfang, that chance is essentially 0. There's always going to be something else that both players can do. And that's why Will and I never really felt motivated to do anything about Shadowfang Flame Animus, because it's such a volatile rush. Because look at this. This rush is affected by essentially, you know, any big wall is going to make this rush not viable. Any like small unit that costs a single blue or a single red or even a single green is going to be relevant, or at least a buying option for at least one of the players, even if they play this line. And that alone, the option of buying something, can change what's good for which player in different situations. So yeah, it's actually a complex opening. I'm not sure who wins. I think Will and I looked into it a few months ago, and we found some defenses for player 1 against these types of player 2 builds, where you go early conduit and get force fields and try and win with Shadowfang Flame Animus. But I actually don't know who wins, player 1 or player 2. I think Will thought that player 2 could pull it out somehow, but I could be completely wrong. I honestly don't know. And we have notes somewhere, and the notes just say there's a bunch of lines that kind of look equal or roughly equal, or maybe promising for one player or the other, but it's hard to tell. Of course, if you guys find any interesting lines or you think that I'm overlooking something, then I welcome all of your comments. And you know, if you think we should nerf Shadowfang Flame Animus anyway, or you think that some changes can improve the gameplay or make it more interesting, I would absolutely love to hear those comments too. But that's all for today's video. I will see you next time, and enjoy playing with Shadowfang, Flame Animus, and the rest of the Prismata units. I will see you later.